Hello everyone. So this is actually attainable real-world security in English. This is what happens when you write presentations late at night, but it's a very straightforward thing. A lot of what Nick has just said was fantastic, and I'm not going to go through exactly the same thing over again, because actually I fully agree with him. It was fantastic stuff. Not so much the NotPetya stuff, but never mind. National Cybersecurity Centre, fantastic, fantastic. I'm not going to go into this in depth. It's free, it's available here. Blah, 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 blah. It is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And where am I pushing the button? Oh, yeah, I guess there. This is it, that's what perfect looks like. It's brilliant, I'm not going to reinvent any wheels. Have a look at that in your own time. It's great. So, the real world, as we know, and as Nick just mentioned, budgets are difficult, resource is limited, appetite for change is always a struggle, appetite for protection is always a struggle. If I could do 4 things really well, what would they be? Now, 10 things are what you need. NCSC, fantastic. If I could only do 4 things with a limited budget, a tiny overstretched team, what would they be to protect our business information? All this is really straightforward. We've got a massive room full of fantastic experts who can do a lot of this stuff. For some reason, knowing who has access to your systems and information is difficult. It's universally difficult. Knowing where your information is difficult in a large enterprise. In a smaller organization, that's not such a difficulty, but knowing who's got the access, what level of access they have, very similar thing. Make it the minimum they need to do their job. Access seems to be some kind of badge of honor. That as people stay in a company for a while and they get promoted through, they gain access to things. And some of the senior managers have access to all sorts of things. Now there are a few reasons for this. One is it's a badge of honor. It's not, but people think it is. The other one is IT teams tend to focus on new starters, because invariably the notice comes late, they suddenly have got someone very important joining the company and they've got to set the access up quick, and if it's not properly controlled, they'll copy a profile of someone else who did the similar job, and they're in and they're running and they've got a machine and they're logged on and phew, great, excellent, they're working, let's do the next one, and the next one and the next one. And then people are leaving, which sometimes it's nice because there's a party. But normally, the IT teams will scrabble to make sure access is cut off just at the point they leave. Bang, they leave the door, shut the door, bang, done. Fantastic. Everyone concentrates on those 2 areas. The bits they don't concentrate on is the bit in between. They start, they progress through the company, then they leave and they cut it off. The live accounts aren't the ones before people have started, and they're not the ones after people have left. It's the live accounts that are the concern. If consistently account access moves up and down, when someone needs to access something, there's likely a service desk. So you can put in the request, appropriate authorization, access is granted. Great, when someone doesn't do that job, reduce the access again. There is almost no reason why anyone should be an admin of their own machine. Yes, it's nice to go home and install printers. Yeah, you could do it a different way. Yes, it's nice to suddenly add a program. Yeah, right. Yes, there are all sorts of nice things, but control is the thing we're doing, because the information is the most important bit in the company. Number 2, again, this isn't a shock. Reduce known vulnerabilities. Apply necessary patches as quickly as possible. There is a bit of work involved in understanding the patches that come out. They're not always going to be applicable. It may be that it just doesn't affect you, but make sure you're running systems, operating systems, applications that are the latest spec according to the vendor. Research it, test it. Don't just slap them on, test it. Patch, do it. You test. Don't hang around for weeks between testing and running it out. Test it. If nothing breaks, apply it. If something later is found to break, okay, roll back. But really, the chances are you're going to test it properly with a pilot group, apply it. And then just don't sit back and go, well, that was great, we've just done that. You do it again and again and again and again and again. Never stop. Never stop. This is the one I touched on a little earlier when I was having a chat. Very nice chat. We can help our staff to help us. If we don't successfully discuss security best practices with our staff, they're going to come up with all those classics, and they're real world things. They're really real. It's funny, I wrote this, they're real. I know every event behind every one of those. I'm not going to go through them, but every one of them ended badly, and none of those were malicious. That's not a user malicious attack on their own company. That's just someone trying to get stuff done quickly so they could go home and have a nice life. If you, I won't go over this because I discussed this in the interview, but if you're training, teaching staff about information security best practices and how to protect themselves, you're also protecting the company. It shouldn't be just a company-focused thing. It's our world thing. You must, if you educate the users, there will still be things that happen, but there will be less of them. And instead of just going, oh God, users, oh, they're idiots. They're not idiots, they're people trying to do their job. And if they don't know, it'd be like giving a Formula One car to someone who hadn't ever driven before and expecting them to win a race. They crash at the first bend. You've got to teach people. The last one, as Nick mentioned, is incredibly dull, really dull, and invariably done by the junior members of the IT team. It's the backup admin. It's not glamorous. No one studies for 3 to 5 years in order to go into a company to become the backup admin. It's drudge work. It's tapes, likely tapes. If it's tapeless backup, I hope there's a tape somewhere. Otherwise, you're replicating corruption, and that's not great. So at some point in the chain, there should be some distinct media with your information on it that's pulled out of the systems and put somewhere very safe with some nice secure controls. When something happens, I'm thinking of the kind of attacks that were mentioned earlier, where machines are turned into lovely looking bits of tin with none of your business data on it, or your business data on it in a form you can't ever read again, and there's no way of getting it back, and don't even think about trying to get it back by paying a few quid to someone somewhere. Just write it off and start restoring information you've backed up. The backup admin, when it goes wrong, and I'd love to say I've never seen this, but I have, you are as good as your backup admin. If he's been diligent, he or she's been diligent, you're in a good place. If they didn't consider it important because no one else seemed to consider it important, and they were generally made to seem like the lowest of the low, and it wasn't important, and some person came up and picked up a tape and took it away, and that was the end of it. If you're not treating that seriously, when something happens, there is no business, and that's it. You're as good as the information you've got in a live state and have backed up. And you're also as good as the media that information sits on. Because if you're not getting it out of the tape store, cupboard, off-site storage facility and checking it, it's again not worth having. So they're 4 things. There are only 4 things. That actually makes what I do for a living seem incredibly easy. That was it. That actually was it. Now, I haven't discussed perimeter in any way. I haven't discussed IPS, IDS. I haven't discussed any other areas. The only one that I glanced across with this, and in fact, I'm going to do this, if I can. Bang, 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 bang. Is this little bit down here. Monitoring. Because logs are easy to come by. They're enormous. We can keep logs pretty much for forever. And they're useless if you haven't got a way of pinpointing the information you need and using it to alert you when something happens. The only way to do this is the thing that actually occupies more of my time than you'd expect. Understanding what's going on within our networks. Understanding who's doing what. Understanding the types of accounts used to do things. Because it's very easy to take a high-level account and do lots of tasks. Actually, some of those tasks don't need those high-level accounts. Restrict them. Back to here again. It's the same thing again. Make it the minimum you need to do the job. Don't use admin accounts for low-level tasks. Use low-level accounts, regular user accounts, wherever possible. Because as you know, this is all stuff that was just mentioned a little while ago. If you're limiting the access, if that account squirrels out of your control because somehow the multi-factor authentication mechanism, someone lost their mobile phone at the same time they lost their password on the same device because they'd written it on the back of the same device, you've lost all that control. I wasn't serious about that bit. Hopefully no one writes their password on the back of their mobile phone. But this is the thing. Monitor, 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 monitor. And then have a tool that makes it useful. So you've got useful information you can action on, goodness me, daily, weekly, monthly, whatever you think's appropriate. I wouldn't go any further away than monthly. To know what's going on, who's got access, who can do stuff. Because it's not the IT department's job to make sure all this is done. It's the business's job. It's everyone in the company. IT departments don't provide security. Information security officers don't provide security. The company has security. The culture is either focused on protecting information or it's not. There is no one thing you can do. The 10 steps, yeah, great, do that. But there is no one thing. If you're doing all 4 of those and something horrible happens, you are taking good steps. If you're not doing one of those 4, then do those 4 at a minimum, and do them well, and really well. Don't do 50 things. Don't do 50 things badly, because there's no point. Whatever you do in this space, make sure you're covering these 4 really well. That's about it, I think.